Hi, this is Ebody NX, and this is the Candid Frame. Hi, this is Ebody NX from the Candid Frame. Well, I was walking my dog yesterday, and we had the first rain of the fall here in the Los Angeles area. And I walked by this garage, which I've walked by God knows how many times. And the rain that had fallen made the whole scene look really, really different from what I'm accustomed to. The air, the sky, the overall light was this very diffused but sort of glowy quality to it. And when I looked at this garage door, I saw it in a way that I hadn't seen it before. So I made a series of images with my iPhone, and I thought that I'd take the time to show you how I'm going to interpret this image using Lightroom and Nikon Viveza II and maybe some color effects filters. First off, I just like the symmetry of the image there, and I like the sort of subtle hues of the colors there. So I know that's something that I want to emphasize here. One of the things that I didn't notice at all until I opened the image up on my computer was that the bird right above the roof line had taken flight, and it's a small little thing, but I think it helps add a little bit, an accent to the image. But let's get to what my process is. So I'm basically going to make as many adjustments as I can to the initial file. So I always go here to the basics module, and I'll establish my black points here by hitting the Option key, and then just moving the slider until I get some detail that is telling me that these areas are going to go to black. I tend to like really, really dark blacks in my frame, so I tend to skew it a little further to the left than some other people do. The details here in these shadows are not particularly important to me. If they were, then I could pull them back a little bit, but I think about there is fine for me. Now I want to pay attention to where my brightest whites are. So I'm going to look at my whites, and I'm losing a little detail in the sky here because this was shot with my iPhone. These are JPEG, so I don't have the benefit of a RAW file. So I want to retain some of that highlight in the sky here. So I'll move the slider in just slightly. I'm not going to go too far with it, because if I go too far, it skews the image a little bit too much. So I'm going to bring it in a little more here, and then I'm going to use the highlight slider to bring in the rest. And that's about it right there. So also want to improve a little bit of the contrast on it, and I'll tweak it a little more. I'm not going to bump up the contrast too much, because I'm going to use some plugins to accentuate that later, but I'm going to increase it a little more here. I like the color here, but let me see what happens when I increase the vibrance. Yeah, I'll add a little vibrance to it, not too much. There's an overall yellow cast to the entire scene, some of which that I may want to retain. But let me see what happens when I adjust the temperature slider on this, because this is probably giving me a more neutral tone of the scene, which I don't really want too neutral, and certainly don't want it to be too cool. So that slightly yellowish tint is something that I actually like. So, but I'm going to dial it down just a bit. Let's see, about minus 5, 7. Let's try about minus 7 from what we had initially. Now I can do the tone curve, but I've already adjusted my contrast slider there, so I'm not going to do anything with that. And I'm going to go down here to lens correction, because something that they have brand new in Lightroom 5 is the ability to be able to correct orientation and perspective a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll enable the profile corrections and the remove chromatic aberration. It's probably very minimal here, but I'm still going to check those off. And then I'm going to hit auto, and it's going to straighten up the image and make it balance a little bit more. So So I like the overall look of that, and it's starting to look pretty good. Now, one of the big issues for me is obviously the sky. I'm going to want to bring lot more detail and color into that. So I can do that using the adjustment brush here. And by using the adjustment brush, I'm able to just start painting in the effects that I want to achieve here. So I want to make this a little darker, and I also want to bring out some of the color. So even before I paint, I'm going to reduce the exposure here by about -2.3. Increase the color saturation a little bit. And I'm going to reduce the clarity, because if there is any noise or anything out there, I don't want to accentuate that. So I'm going in here and I'm bringing out the sky a little bit. Not much. I don't want to do something really overly dramatic, but just a little bit there. So that looks about right. I'm going to use another tool later to be able to accentuate it. Now I could apply some sharpening to the image here, but I really don't want to do that. It's a JPEG, so any sort of pre-sharpening that I normally would do with a RAW file, I'm really going to go to avoid that here. The image looks to be pretty sharp. I'm not seeing much evidence of noise here on this. So I'm not going to apply any noise reduction, because if I did, it would reduce the overall sharpness of the image. So I think in terms of the file that I'm starting with, I'm really happy with it here. But now I'm going to, okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it into Viveza II. So I'll go into here, Photo, Edit in Viveza II, and then I want to maintain all the adjustments that I just made in Lightroom. So we'll do that. And the way that I think about using Viveza II, or any sort of plugin for that matter, is I see it as an opportunity to make more selective edits of the image. What I'm doing in Lightroom is pretty broad. It's sort of universal changes to the overall shot. But now I want to start fine-tuning the image in a particular way. Now I have these sliders here where I can brighten the overall image, and I can also apply a little more contrast and saturation and structure, and I can do that overall, and it improves the image a little bit. But now I want to control the viewer's experience of the photograph, and the way that I'm going to do that is by using selective points. So these control points are going to allow me to do that. So the main interest for me is this door, is the sort of the shape of the door, and I love the colors and the tones here. So I want to be able to emphasize all of this over here and sort of draw the viewer's attention to the center of the frame. So one of the first things I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to see what I can do about the sky, because it's still it's still bright. It's the brightest element in the scene, and I want to make it a little darker. So what I'm going to do is I chose a control point, and then I'm just going to bring this in slightly darker, increase the contrast a little more. Let's go a little darker. Let's see what happens when I reduce the contrast. Well, actually, yeah, I'm going to reduce the contrast a little bit and make it a little darker. So right now, when I look at the control point, if I click on this button here, it gives me a view of the mask that's being applied. So you can see that the control point is primarily affecting the area here, and not the dark areas here, and very minimally here. So that's exactly what I want. So next, I'm going to add another control point, and what I want to do here is I want to darken this area around here and as well increase the contrast. So I'm going to make it a little darker, and I'm going to increase the contrast. And then by just hitting the Option key and grabbing the control point, I can just move it over here to make that area a little bit darker. Also want to do that towards this area here on the side. So I'm going to take this control point, and let me see how it looks when I bring it over here. Okay, I like that, and I'm actually going to make it a little darker. Increase the contrast a little bit more. With the control point over here. So you see I'm darkening the areas here on the side and sort of creating sort of hopefully a pathway towards the center. These areas here of the wall besides it are really bright as well, so I want to create less attention there. So I'm going to create another control point, choose this yellow, and I'm going to make it a little darker, as well as increasing the contrast. And maybe go even a little darker here. All right, that looks good. And now I'll move it over here to this wall. And you can see how the control point, depending if it's on this dark area of the wall where the waters run down or whether it's lighter here, makes a big difference in how that looks. So it's the same adjustments here. Let me see about that little streak because I like that there. Let me see what I can do with that. So I don't want it to be brighter. I actually want to make it darker. Let me make the control point a little smaller. So make it darker. Yeah, and let's see what happens with the contrast. That's about right. Okay, so this area right here, I actually want to make a little brighter because I want to make it a pathway to leading up into the image. So I'm going to create this area here, and I'm going to brighten it just slightly, and then I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit. Now here's the key area here in terms of the door. Now this area right here is sort of serving as a frame for the door. So I actually want to take a little of that yellow cast and make it a little wider and to help draw the viewer's attention to the center of the frame. So I'm going to take another control point, put it over here, and you immediately see the difference that it makes there. So I'm going to choose the control point, and I'm going to make it a little brighter. Increase the contrast slightly. Increase the saturation just a little bit. And I could apply a little structure, but I think I'm pretty good. So now I'll just take the same control point and move it over here to the side of the door. And here. So now I want to do something with this door here. So I'm going to take another control point, put it right in the center of the door. And I have a lot of flexibility here with this. So let's see what happens when I make it a little darker. I want to accentuate the sort of the contrast between the white frame and the door. So I'm going to do that. Increase the contrast a little more. Saturation. Let's see if let's make it, I'll skew it a little more here. I also have the ability, if I hit these down arrows, to have some other options, which include the ability to be able to make it a little warmer. To give it sort of a look as if it's like redwood, which I kind of like. Have this little place here where the paint is peeling, so I want to bring that out. So I'm going to choose another control point. Set it there. Make it a little smaller. And then I'm going to make it a little brighter. I don't want it too much. Contrast. So that's good. So let's see. Here's what we have so far. Sort of flat, and now I'm really starting to bring it out. So now I want to do something with the green here. Well, actually, I have this roof line here, which is kind of the same color as this. So let me see what happens when I bring the control point over here. It just makes it a little bit darker, adds a little more contrast. So I'm just going to take that point, and I'm just going to apply them here. Don't have to make some huge changes to that. But now let's do something here with the green color. Now, I know I want to boost the color saturation on that, but first let me see what happens with the slider when I bring it. Yeah, I don't want to brighten it too much. I actually want to darken it just a little. And then I'm going to increase the color saturation on it just a pad. Move it around. Let's see how different it gives me. Actually, I might want to brighten it just a little bit. Let's brighten it to about 7. And then I'm going to, again, hit the control key and spread it around to these different areas here. Let me preview it back and forth. So yeah, okay, so that looks pretty good. So I think I'm pretty much done. I could accentuate the clouds a little bit by creating another control point and adding making it darker, but also applying a little bit of structure. Yeah, so you can see that those clouds are starting to stand out a little bit. That's a little bit too much. So we'll just make it a little smaller and reduce the structure. Okay, That looks pretty good. It still looks pretty natural. So let me see if I want to brighten this area just a little bit more. After I've done all that other work, I think it might be good just to brighten it at a tad. And also this area around here, I probably want to make it a little darker. Let me see what these control points here do. Okay. And then I'm going to apply these other control points here because this is sort of influencing what's happening here on the door, which I don't want it to do. So I'm just going to make these smaller. Actually, what I'm going to do is take this control point and just copy it over here and over here at the corner. And as you can see, that those adjustments are being picked up by the small little details there. So I think I'm pretty happy with this. Let's see the preview, and that's what I'm getting now. There's a slight bluish cast to the sky, but I don't mind that. It was a cloudy, rainy day, so it looked like it was pretty good there. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm almost done with it. But one more thing that I want to do is I want to apply sort of a vignette to the image, because you're still looking at the overall image, and I find that the lens effects within Lightroom are good, but there's a feature in one of the Nik one of the Nik plugins in Color Efex Pro, and I like using that because I think the effect is a lot more subtle than normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use darken and lighten center, which is one of the ones here that I listed as my favorite. And basically this creates a vignette. It makes the areas around the edges of the frame darker, and you can see here by border luminosity, as you bring it down, it gets darker and darker on the periphery, or brighter along the edges. I definitely want to go darker. And then the border, the center of the image, the center luminosity, I could make brighter or darker. So I want to make it a little brighter, and then here I can actually change the size of the area. So here I can get a very, very almost spotlight effect, or I can bring it out a little more. And I'm going to move the slider back and forth here until I get something along the lines of that. So let me see how this compares. This is before, this is after, before and after. So I am getting some darkening here, but I'm getting to emphasize the very shape of the door that it really appealed to me. I can also apply multiple filters without having to close and reopen the application by hitting that button right here, and it provides a space for an empty filter. So I want to increase the contrast a bit, and I have several options here. I can go to Pro Contrast or Tonal Contrast. Let's see what Tonal Contrast does. That boosted up quite a bit. These are the sort of the normal defaults for 25, 50, 25 in highlight, midtones, and shadows. And I like what it's doing there, but I don't want it to be that aggressive. So what I tend to do is I dial all of these down to about 10. And I don't want the saturation to be as high as 20. So I'm going to take it back to 0. I'll have that at about just 5 or 6. Okay, and let's see what happens with the contrast type. I have standard, got high pass. That looks kind of interesting. I got fine. Ooh, fine looks pretty good. Balanced and strong. I think strong is going to be, no, that's not going to work for me. So I think I'll go with, it's always a little tricky. I think I'll go with fine for this one. So I'm going to compare it again. So this is before and this is after. So I'm losing some detail here in the shadows. So I do have the ability with the control points of being able to adjust this, but I can also move these sliders here to adjust the details in the shadows. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of the shadows back here. Not so much concerned with the highlights, but let me move the slider back and forth. Mostly I'm seeing that in the sky. So one of the things I don't like is sort of this artifacting that's happening with the color of the sky. So I'm definitely going to have to take it out of here. So I'm taking this minus control point and making sure that I don't have that effect being too aggressive in these different areas of the sky, because I just don't like the color distortion that I'm getting there. I'm pretty happy with the sky as is. And let's do a side by side. So this is what I was getting before, after all of my adjustments in Lightroom and with the Color Efex Pro filters. So it looks pretty good. It's emphasizing the very area of the frame of the scene that I wanted to accentuate. So I'm going to go here and save it. I may need to still rework it a little bit because of what's happening with the sky. I may need to desaturate it later, but overall I'm pretty happy with the results that I'm getting here. So as you can see, it's sort of the art of refinement. You can make all these sort of global adjustments to it, and often that's fine, but in order to convey what I was felt about the scene, I really had to go in there and start really working with using all these controls in really specific ways to achieve a certain look. And as you can see, I'm really trying to stay as natural as I can. It's still going to be a very subjective interpretation of the scene. I think in the hands of another photographer, they might interpret this in a completely different way. But I think what's kind of important to think about anytime you sit down to work on an image is to think about, well, what's the most interesting part of the scene or my subject, and how can I use this software to accentuate that and to create for the viewer the same experience that you had when you witnessed this. And I feel like I've done that with this photograph. So I hope this is helpful to you. We're doing a variety of things with this YouTube channel, not just tutorials. We're going to be scheduling another Google Hangout soon, and I'm probably going to be doing more critiques of the images that are uploaded to the Candid Frame Flickr pool. So if you haven't joined this already there, please do. And if you like what you're seeing on this channel, please subscribe. So until next time, this is Ibadi NX, and this is the Candid Frame.